Hello, I'm Larry Dixon, and this is another edition of Conversation with First Baptist Church. With me today is Melinda Willis. Melinda, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
It's good to be here.
I have a few questions for you.
All right, I'm ready.
So, tell me what life was like growing up as a little girl, and where was that?
It was in a lot of different places. I was born in Orange, Texas, and my folks lived there for about 3 years. My brother was born there too. And then we moved to Fort Gibson, Oklahoma. All of our moves related to my dad's work. He was an instrument technician for chemical plants of various sorts. And we moved to Fort Gibson, and life there was, from a kid's perspective of a 4, 5, 6-year-old, was idyllic. We lived out in the country. We had cows and horses and chickens. My brother and I played outside all the time. And we just sort of had free reign of the place. It was far, far out. We hardly ever saw cars or trucks pass by. So it was a great place to grow up. And I think the phone was on a party line, so it was back that far away, in time. I went to a 2-room schoolhouse. I started out there. There was a lot of money and support for Native Americans at that time. Not necessarily in the best way from my perspective as an adult, but it was a school that was created for Native American children. But there weren't any that were in that area at the time. But there were 3 people in my first grade class, and I was in a class with 1st through 4th grade, and then the next room was 5th through 8th grade. And so I feel like I got a strong start in education, being able to listen to all the lessons and everything that year. In the summer of '63, we moved to Odessa, Texas, which was a far cry from northeastern Oklahoma. It was sand dunes and mesquite bushes and very little grass, but it too was a good place to be. Lived there for 4 years, and then we moved to Louisiana. And when people ask me where I grew up, I usually say Louisiana, because that's where I spent the most years of my growing up life. Went to junior high, which is now middle school there, and graduated from high school there in Baton Rouge. So we wandered around a lot. I think my dad always thought the grass was greener, or my mother told him the grass would be greener somewhere else.
So, growing up as a little girl, what did you want to be once you were an adult?
This is going to crack you up. We went to a lot of rodeos when we lived in Oklahoma and in Texas and even Louisiana. That was the thing to do. It was pretty free entertainment, I guess. And I was always fascinated by the girls, the young women who would ride out on the horses at the very beginning of the rodeo. They would have a flag in their, in a stirrup or something, and they always had these wonderful, colorful clothes on. They had the hat and the shirt and the chaps and the boots that all matched. Long flowing hair coming out underneath the hat. And I just thought that was the most glorious looking thing in the whole world.
If you could choose to do anything for a day, what would that be?
I think probably spend the day with my husband.
He'll be glad to hear that.
Yeah, he will. He'll be shocked too. We are fortunate in that we really like each other. Not only are we in love still, we like spending time together. There's nobody I'd rather spend my day with. And I probably would want to spend it working on a project around the house. That's been a consistent part of our relationship for 45 years, is working on stuff around the house. Yeah.
What careers have you had over the years?
My careers have all been related to academia in one way or another. When I first started work out after college, I worked at the Billy Graham Center Library in Wheaton, Illinois. From there we moved to Oklahoma, and I worked in the libraries there. Chemistry, mathematics library, and then in the big library in the reference department. My schooling had trained me to be a librarian, but my goal was to be a librarian in an elementary school. When we moved here from Danville, it was very difficult to find a job at that time. Things were kind of closed off to outsiders, if you will. And
Not from around here, are you?
no, I was not. And so it was tricky getting in. And so I finished my master's degree here in that interim. And one of my professors encouraged me to go ahead and get my doctorate. She said, I really think that you would do well at that level. I went to UK and I did get my doctorate in education. Moorhead happened to have an opening. Somebody unfortunately got very ill suddenly, and there was a position open, and I was really fortunate to get that. The timing was just right. So I just finished up 24 years there, and now I'm retired.
So, growing up, did you have a nickname, or do you have a nickname now?
I did. My brother gave me a nickname. The background on it is I love football. And when I was younger, much younger, I liked to play touch football and things like that. And when I was a young teenager, I was pretty good at throwing the ball and kicking the ball for a girl, as they would say back in those days. And so I was also bigger than most. I was tall. I wasn't heavy at that point. But I would get out with the kids and I would play, and so my brother started calling me Moose.
Oh, that's interesting.
Such a nice name for a brother to give his sister. And my middle name is Joe, so he started calling me Moose Joe. And then it got shortened to Mojo. And so that was the name that most of my family and close friends called me through high school, and it even carried over to college.
You mentioned you like to cook. Is that one of your hobbies, or what are your hobbies?
Well, I love to cook. I love to eat. I really like to decorate houses and things like that. So for quite a while, there was no telling where the couch would be when one would come in the living room, because I might have rearranged things. I like doing my art. I do Zentangle and doodle art with micron pens and markers, and made a nice tidy sum of money to support the markers and pens mostly. I like really doing any kind of art that involves lots of hands-on things with fabric, with threads. I knit and crochet. I've done some collage art that I'm really proud of. And I love to read too. That's always been, obviously it's woven through my whole life.
If you were a superhero, what superpower would you want?
I don't know if it's a superpower or not, but I just finished a book in which, at the very beginning of the story, the main character is killed in a hit and run. And she goes to heaven. But she's also given what are called nudges. And it's not that you can directly, you can't take a person and make them fall in love or something, but you can nudge a little bit to get them in a slightly different direction. Sometimes I would like to give folks a little nudge to make a decision, to not get stuck.
If you could travel and go back in time, what time frame, what time period would you find interesting to experience?
I think I would like to go back to a time when my grandparents were young and youthful, which would have been at the turn of the 20th century. They were all born in the late 1890s.
Tell me what brought you to First Baptist Church.
Well, it's a short story. We moved here from Danville, Virginia, and we were really involved in First Baptist Church there. We had really good friends that were part of that church, but also really good friends in the community, particularly friends that Wayne worked with. And we had hit kind of a rough spot at that church. There were some people who were basically the financial backbone of the church who didn't like some things that the pastor was doing. From my perspective, they were exercising their moneyed powers to make some change, or wanted to make some changes, and that just didn't seem right. It just didn't seem right. And so coming here, we were kind of put out with that. It was also sort of the beginnings of the discomfort in the Southern Baptist Convention. All those rumblings were going on as well. And so we decided we're just going to check out all the churches here in Moorhead and see where we land. But, well, we started out here and we never went anywhere else. Our relationships. We've seen lots of people that have come in that have just been broken down by life. And this is a good place to heal because people are accepting, they care, but they don't get nosy.
Okay, I have a couple of last questions, two or three here.
All right.
If you were stranded on a desert island, who would that be with?
It would be Peter, the disciple Peter. I put some thought into this. I was thinking deserted island, survival, eating, and he's a fisherman, so he could help out with that little trick. But I also think Peter is a sort of a composite of many people, and mainly me, I guess. His devotion to Jesus and to the ministry that Jesus had was unparalleled. But he also messed up in just as big of ways as he was dedicated. He also messed up, and I feel like that's sort of how I have been too. I've messed up, but like Peter, I always come back to the source.
Well, I have one last question for
Okay.
you, and it is your thoughts on fried bologna and space aliens.
Fried bologna, I have never liked fried bologna. I like plain old bologna, but not fried bologna. My grandmother, the only time I ever remember having any kind of disagreement with her was she wanted me to eat fried bologna, and I said, I don't like fried bologna, I like plain bologna. And she went into this, do you know what's in bologna? You can't eat that, without cooking it, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember sitting there with this piece of curled up fried bologna in front of me and her saying, you can't get up until you eat that. And I just sat there crying for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably 10 minutes. And finally she said, you're really not going to eat that, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. In terms of space aliens, I don't think so. I don't care.
Well, this has been another conversation with First Baptist Church. I'm Larry Dixon, and with me today has been Melinda Willis. It has been a treat.
It has. Thank you.
Thank you.